Before I conclude, I want to make sure the committee is clear about a few things. News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
We'll have order. Please proceed, Mr. Kennedy.
I am pro-safety. I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. And I believe that that vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated. I've written many books on vaccines. My first book in 2014, the first line of it is, I am not anti-vaccine, and the last line is, I am not anti-vaccine. Nor am I the enemy of food producers. American farms are the bedrock of our culture, of our politics, of our national security. I was a 4-H kid, and I spent my summer working on ranches. I went to work with our farmers. I want to work with our farmers and food producers to remove burdensome regulations and unleash American ingenuity. MAHA simply cannot succeed without a partnership, a full partnership of American farmers. In my advocacy, I've often disturbed the status quo by asking uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not going to apologize for that. We have massive health problems in this country that we must face honestly. And the first thing I've done every morning for the past 20 years is to get on my knees and pray to God that he would put me in a position to end the chronic disease epidemic and to help America's children. That's why I'm so grateful to President Trump for the opportunity to sit before you today and seek your support and partnership in this endeavor. I will conclude with a promise. The members of this committee, to the president, and to all the tens of millions of parents across America, especially the moms, who have propelled this issue to center stage. Should I be so privileged as to be confirmed, we will make sure our tax dollars support healthy foods. We will scrutinize the chemical additives in our food supply. We will remove financial conflicts of interest from our agencies. We will create an honest, unbiased, gold standard science at HHS, accountable to the president, to Congress, and to the American people.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hurting Humanity channel. For those of you that didn't see, RFK Jr. was in front of Congress, and as they always do, they put on this gigantic theatrical WWF/WWE performance in Congress. And of course, this is how they play into the left-right. The Democrats always go after the Republican guy who's nominated by the president, and they slander him and they scream at him. And of course, this gives the illusion of the left and right, as if these people are actually opposed to one another. Don't forget, RFK ran as an independent, supposedly, for president of the United States just a few months ago, but has been a lifelong Democrat, as the majority of Kennedys are. So what you saw in Congress was a charade. But as always with these serpents, there's a reason behind the charade. And you heard him right in the beginning of the video clip talk about how he was pro-jab. He's pro-jab, he's not anti-jab. So they established that right away. And nobody should be surprised because he's not anti-jab. So you might say to yourself, then what is going on? Why are they bringing RFK, who's going to be the health secretary pick by Donald Trump? He's going to lead the Department of Health. Why is he in front of Congress? Why are they asking him these questions? What's he going to be all about? And what is this all about? This is all about rebuilding trust. The reason you hear the government finally talking about high fructose corn syrup, the chemicals that they dump in our food that somehow gets approved by the FDA every single day, right? I've talked over the years about stories in regards to weed killer being found in cereals and processed foods. And anybody out there who lives in the United States of America, which is the majority of you, all you have to do is go grab a box of something that you own processed, hypothetically, let's say a cereal, and read what's on the ingredient list. And you can't pronounce half the stuff on there, so you probably shouldn't be eating it, right? If you're eating whole grain oats, it should say whole grain oats. That should pretty much be it. But instead, there's about 95 chemicals. And if you haven't noticed, something I've covered over the years is that there's different ingredients, let's say in products like Cheerios in America versus the UK versus Australia. In America specifically, since we are part of the American experiment and we're human lab rats, they poison us beyond comprehension. The stuff they put in our food doesn't compare in other countries. They don't have high fructose corn syrup or any of this stuff jammed in the food that makes people sick and makes people fat. So what you're hearing from RFK is that he's going to come in and he's going to clean up the food supply chain. He's going to clean up what the FDA is doing. And this is all about rebuilding trust. For those of you that don't know, one of the main themes, not just this year, not just last year, every single year in Davos, specifically since all that stuff happened in 2021, they have constantly talked about rebuilding trust. Because the only way they're going to be able to get certain things inside your body that edit your genes is by rebuilding trust. You have to trust them first. So what other way are they going to start getting you on board and thinking you can trust them than by finally admitting to the chemicals in the food? Because even people out there who are pretty dumbed down have an awareness of how bad processed food is for them. You see people out there who you would think are completely clueless who still have an understanding. This is a Democrat and Republican thing. The majority of people, even though sometimes they might indulge in McDonald's or indulge in eating something that's, a sweet tooth thing like Oreos, they're well aware that there is nothing but crap in the majority of food. So it makes perfect sense for RFK to come out and talk about cleaning up the food supply chain, getting chemicals out of our food. It's amazing that we even have to have a discussion about getting chemicals out of our food. You'd think everybody would just boycott all of these companies or do more than that, right? Because, of course, if you were to buy, say, a box of Cheerios from your next door neighbor and you ate the Cheerios, I often remember a story of a guy, I forget if it was the 60s or 70s, who was taking Coca-Colas out of his neighbor's fridge because he hated his neighbor. And he was putting poison in the Coca-Cola, eventually killed the mother of the children because she had poisoning, extreme poisoning. The doctors couldn't figure out what it was. Well, of course, he was tried for murder because he poisoned her. So shouldn't these companies be tried for murder upon other things, and not only that, be long out of business? But they're not. They still function in our society, which shows us that we really are nothing more than an experiment. So RFK is going to begin building back trust, which is why he's also talking about how he's not anti-vax. He's just anti-certain vaxes, right? But for anybody out there that hasn't seen over the last couple of weeks leading up to RFK speaking in front of Congress, well, he's invested heavily in gene editing biotech stocks. Specifically, he's invested in CRISPR. For those of you that don't know, I've been talking about CRISPR for a long time, talking about CRISPR gene editing, talking about CRISPR and how it can pass from a mother through breast milk or pass through you consuming let's say an egg or a chicken that's injected with CRISPR. And don't forget about how they've been running CRISPR experiments with chickens in hopes of stopping the bird flu. So for somebody who says that they're against big pharma and what they're trying to do and is anti-vax, this is all charade. It's a show. And this is really them revealing themselves by telling you what stocks RFK is invested in. He's invested in CRISPR. And people should look at that and say, he's invested in a gene editing stock, but they don't. They don't because they don't pay attention to the most basic things, right? For anyone that doesn't know, again, just to rewind on CRISPR, CRISPR gene editing is a genetic engineering technique that allows scientists to modify an organism's DNA. It's based on a bacterial immune defense system that protects against viruses. That's what they tell you, that last line. But what's important to note is modify an organism's DNA. Because remember, the most simplest way to put this to a sheeple is that watch a crime show. How do they solve most of these crimes? They want you to know they solve it via DNA now, right? And CCTV cameras, because they want a CCTV camera on every corner and they want you to submit your DNA to the government. But how is it always solved? DNA, right? Did you ever wonder how they can trace that DNA back to one specific individual? It's because they have their own specific DNA. And that's the thing that they want to modify. I mean, you can even ask Google AI. Yes, CRISPR can change you by altering your DNA.
The difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, just as an example, it's you who are changed. And of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
Right? Remember all those quotes from Klaus Schwab about how this gene editing was so important to everything that they're doing and how it will change what it means to be a human being. So that's the stock that RFK happens to be invested in as somebody who's anti-vax. And of course, don't forget that RFK, even during the outbreak, had a big party with his Hollywood celebrity wife, Cheryl Hines. And, well, you had to have a certain something inside of you to enter the party. So you would think somebody who was so anti this thing would say to his wife, well, that's not happening for many reasons. One, I don't want everyone here to shed on me. And number two, this stands against my values. But is this the type of man that lets his wife dictate the things in his life? I don't know. I would have to think probably not, because this entire thing is a ruse that they're playing on the American people, with RFK being the person who's going to help build back trust side by side with Donald Trump, which is why they released that video footage, which I've shown you guys many times, where after RFK, he was backing out of running for president, this is phone call in private with RFK and Donald Trump occurs that RFK's son films and puts up on social media, right? I mean, just think about how deliberate that was. And what do they talk about in there? They talk about how they're anti-vax. Well, why would they all of a sudden be? I mean, that's the father of the vax, the man who called himself the father of the vax, Donald Trump. And that's RFK, who just told you before Congress that he is pro-vax. He is. Just certain ones he's not on board with, right? Well, they put that out there because they're trying to build back trust. Don't forget, Donald Trump just came out on day one talking about AI governance, AI infrastructure, and what? A cure for cancer, a cancer vax. They have to build back trust if people are going to get on board. And guess what? Everybody has to have it in them for this beast system to function, hence the mark of the beast, right? So on top of that, I want to play for you this other clip because I thought that this stood out to me for everybody out there who's followed me over the years. It's incredible. It's incredible because it reminds me of Alex Jones. When Alex Jones went for his sham trial and he had the opportunity to at least defend himself, he could have sat there and said, hey, I apologize. I didn't mean to hurt someone's feelings. I was just questioning this or that. Can you show me some evidence? Can you prove to me that this happened? Well, of course they didn't do that. Instead, he just lost $1 billion lawsuit and probably has more money than he's ever had and is constantly still promoted all over the place. But nonetheless, RFK had a chance to defend himself on some of these quote-unquote conspiracies, but of course he didn't. He just looks like a bumbling fool when asked questions about things like, well, is a militarized bioweapon you consider Lyme's disease to be something created by the military as a bioweapon? And he says, well, I might have said something like that. I mean, it sounds like something. Okay. And just gets yelled at. Listen to this.
Did you say that Lyme disease is highly likely a materially engineered bioweapon? I made sure I put in the highly likely. Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of
I
Lyme
want all
disease
of our
said.
colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy. I want them to hear it. You said yes.
So it's incredible because what could RFK have done? Well, RFK could have brought up Plum Island because Plum Island is where Lyme's disease originated. A lot of diseases that we all think have been around forever, right? Because nobody sits around and says, when did that disease start? When did Lyme? You just assume that it's always been here and it's never been solved, right? Nobody thinks that there's mad scientists creating diseases, but there are. And that's why people constantly find new diseases and constantly are getting sick with all sorts of things, whether it's a skin ailment to a permanent disease or something like Lyme's disease that they get, right? Nobody thinks about it, which is why they get away with it. But Plum Island, the Animal Disease Center, this mysterious island that they had, he could have brought it up. And he could have said, biowarfare has been going on over at Plum Island from putting viruses and things in mosquitoes and unleashing them to putting them in ticks. But of course, they don't want to bring attention to that, and he doesn't either. Now, Plum Island was located off of Long Island, and it's a theory, but it's a truthful theory because we all know the types of experiments, if you look at government documents of what was going on at Plum Island, that's where Lyme's disease originated. Now, over the years, more and more people became suspicious as to what was going on Plum Island. So what they did was they took Plum Island, they told us they shut it down, and then guess where they moved it? Well, they moved it out in Kansas, right? What better place than where most of our food is made, right? A lot of farmland in Kansas, and now they're doing it out there. And what happened to Plum Island since then? Has it shut down? Well, no, it hasn't shut down. Don't you know that the Pentagon has its own island, Plum Island, that they're using to run war games for a giant cyber attack on the power grid? That's right, DARPA's using Plum Island to stage a cyber attack on the U.S. power grid. And of course, we know that they're not staging an attack on the power grid. They're operating one. They're going to carry one out and then blame it on Russia, blame it on China, blame it on the boogeyman, as they always do. But they've been doing it for years now, working on cyber attacks. Probably why we see, well, not probably, we see, how many cyber attacks do we see over the years, right? Oh, McDonald's is off, Bank of America, AT&T, your info's getting released, right? Well, who do you think's staging it? Who do you think's running it? The president of Bank of America doesn't know how to carry it out, but he's in bed with the government, and the government says, look, we're going to do a data breach here. As part of your oath that you took to the Brotherhood, we're going to do one with you. You're not going to lose any customers. Do you think Bank of America or AT&T lost any customers when they were shut down for a day or had a data breach? Doubtful. And guess what? They print money, so they don't actually care. So RFK had the ability to bring up something that, of course, when he says it like that in Congress, when the congressman presents it like that, it makes the majority of people out there roll their eyes and think that it's some crazy conspiracy. Oh, it's not a crazy conspiracy at all. In fact, they admit to doing that on Plum Island. What do you think an animal disease center does? You think that they were bringing in cats and dogs and, grooming them, and it was just a big Petco up there? Yeah, come on up to Plum Island. It's for the Animal Disease Center. Did you hear about the government curing any specific diseases for pets? Or have you heard since Plum Island's invention just how more and more pets get sick? I mean, we have cats and dogs that have diabetes, okay? So they're clearly not curing anything for animals. In fact, they're just engineering bugs and things as bioweapons. That's what they've been doing for quite some time. Hence the stuff you hear about Bill Gates unleashing GMO mosquitoes. So of course, RFK didn't take the opportunity to bring up Plum Island because we can't have an awakening actually occur. So he sounds like a fool. So it's just another thing they could check off their list. These little subtle things program people into not researching stuff and waking up to stuff. So they're like, oh, military Lyme disease, what? Their heads blow up, right? But if they only knew that, yeah, all these diseases that you don't think about where they came from, how they came, why they keep popping up, it's because your government's a bunch of mad, sick, psychotic scientists. And they're not really scientists, they're psychopaths, but they use the term scientist to get away with all this stuff. Didn't you notice back in 2020 how they were telling you to trust the psychopath? Trust the science? Yeah. So in addition to all those things with trusting RFK, never forget how RFK is on the record talking about how people who deny global warming and deny the climate agenda should be thrown in jail. Never forget that.
Be in jail. I think they should be enjoying 3 hots and a cot at The Hague with all the other war criminals who are there.
What about politicians, people who deny, who express
I
skepticism?
think they're selling out the public trust. And, I think those guys who are doing the Koch brothers bidding and who are against all the evidence of the rational mind are saying that global warming doesn't exist, that they are contemptible human beings, and that, I wish that there were a law you could punish them under. I don't think there's a law that you can punish those politicians under, but I think the Koch brothers should be prosecuted for reckless endangering? Absolutely.
So does it look like RFK is someone that's on your side? Of course he's not. It's amazing how they flip-flop, right? It's amazing how they post pictures on X, right? Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Trump all together, and they say, hey, 10 years ago we were all Democrats, now we're Republicans, right? Oh, but we're supposed to believe that they just shifted, all of their ideologies just shifted all of a sudden, right? They're all compromised. They're all working together. The seesaw, eliminating rights, bringing in new things, and of course, building back trust. Because what do you think the purpose of the Democratic Party the last 4 years was to remove trust. Because even people out there who were Democrats were not thrilled about the fact that military people lost their jobs. Many people lost their jobs because they didn't take something in their body that they didn't want to take. Now, we know most of those Democrat people out there didn't support all of the people out there who were rejecting it. But now look where we are all these years later, 4 years later. You have all these people who were Democrats then, who are now conservative, who are saying, well, I'm not anti-vax, I'm pro-vax, I'm just anti-certain ones, right? And he's here now to tell you that he's going to take the chemicals out of the food. He's probably going to tell you he's going to take the fluoride out of the water, and people are going to believe it. But guess what? They're not really going to remove anything. They're just going to replace it with new harmful chemicals that you don't know anything about, because that's what they do. So you might say, this chemical here causes cancer. Okay, RFK will remove it. Now you'll see a chemical on there called zavalabaramana, which you can't pronounce. And then you'll study and research, try to find its origins. And maybe 10 years from now, you'll finally discover what it actually is. And then they'll change it again. But in the meantime, they need to build back trust, because they need to get something in you by 2030. And that's what RFK's job and Donald Trump's job is going to be. So don't fall for the clown show, folks. Anytime they are in front of Congress, this is a way for them to get support, because when they see their people on their side and their party get attacked, it makes them support them more. Just like Trump with the news media, right? Him getting attacked every day made people support him more. Him getting fake assassinated made people support him more. When they put these people in Congress like this, who are a part of, this has got one of Donald Trump's guys, and then they just get blasted for 45 minutes, it makes Trump supporters support and trust RFK more. They did the same thing with Fauci, right? This is what they do. Nobody's ever held accountable. Nobody ever gets arrested. It's a show. It's literally political theater. That's the role that Congress plays. It's to persuade you. And here, this will build trust back, again, with conservatives for RFK. So for the next couple of months, when he's out there taking all these chemicals out of food and talking about how people are healthier, and this is a psychosis too, so they'll convince people that they're healthier than ever, and they'll believe it. And then when they tell you about a potion, the one they just suggested to you, the cancer one, then you'll trust him a little bit more, and he'll say, look, I promise. Trump promises. They're going to ease you into it. It's all psychological. That's what the American experiment is. It's psychological. It's a war on your mind. It's an information war, but it's also a war of how you perceive news and what you perceive as truth. And when you see the entire thing as theater, which is what it is, and you don't get sucked in, it's hard for them to play games on your mind. Remember that. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.